There's a new side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game releasing on iOS today called The Day We Fought Space. And Seema and I got a chance to talk to the game creators this week.
It's easy to weave your finger in and out of dots on a screen, and it just makes you feel so much more. It makes you feel like an amazing pilot that way. And that got me thinking, okay, well,
Mhm.
if you can do this with one finger, what can you do if you've got two full hands at your disposal?
That's Catherine Kimport and Susan Schaefer, and we chat about their inspiration, their tools and process, and some advice for others looking to make a game. Let's check it out.
This is Behind the Games from NewOverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
From the New Overlords Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Ilimek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
And today we are joined by Catherine Kimport and Susan Schaefer, who together make up the core of Tursiops Truncatus Studio. Catherine and Susan, welcome.
Hey there.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
Hey, so I had a great time meeting you guys, well, meeting you, Susan, in particular. I've met Catherine over the video, over the web since then, but I met Susan at PAX East. And it was a really cool setup that you had there to show off this new game that we're going to be talking about, The Day We Fought Space, which is coming out soon, and we'll talk all about that. But what I got a little bit of an intro to there at PAX was what Tursiops Truncatus is and how the studio got started. So that's why I wanted to start with you guys, say hello, and hear how you two got together and how the studio got together.
Well, the studio itself started as a solo dev effort kind of in the late 90s. I did some shareware development or freeware, I guess. I wasn't asking for people to mail things to my home address. So that lasted a few years, nothing huge. And when I came back to development, I got into a little mobile stuff with a game called Primrose. And then for the next game, I decided I wanted to go something more ambitious. And that was something we really kind of pivoted from solo dev to team dev with this game. And the first person on that team was Susan to do the artwork. And it's been a great partnership ever since.
Yeah.
How did you two get connected?
Go ahead.
I mean, how did Catherine find Susan or Susan find Catherine and get that to go together?
Well, we played roller derby together in Madison, Wisconsin, and so we were on the same league.
I did not see that
team.
coming.
And so we met there, and then we ended up just talking over coffee or breakfast one day,
waffles.
and Cathy explained what she had. Oh yeah, waffles. The visual for what she had in mind for The Day We Fought Space, and I was like, yes, this is excellent. I'm super excited about it, and so I brainstormed my ideas from there. And
at that point, Susan, had you already been like a gamer type? Like, had you been playing games?
I've been playing games my whole life. I would say that I am not as savvy about as many games out there as like Cathy, for instance, but I have been a gamer my whole life, playing particularly on the Nintendo systems. But
Nice.
That's serendipity, and I think that's a great opportunity for other people out there that are trying to put together a team. Talk to everybody. Tell them your ideas. Tell them your plans, and find out what their skills are and how they can complement. I think that's something that you two definitely seem to have going together, is that complement of skills. Seema and I have complementing skills. She has the intelligence, and I just have raw speaking voice power or something. I don't know.
I would love to have someone be able to speak for me what's in my brain some days. It's like, I have an idea. All that's coming out of my mouth is just random noises that aren't explaining it.
Yeah, it does come in handy.
Absolutely. In fact, we did an interview 2 episodes ago with a senior game designer, and we spent a bunch of time in that interview talking about communication skills. And as a studio, as people in a studio, there's huge challenges, not only in just being able to communicate your own ideas, which I'm sure all of us have some skill in, but to communicate it in a language that the other person or the other team members of the other disciplines can understand.
yes.
So,
That's so important.
but let's get into that a little bit. Let's get into some of your skills. And Cathy, we'll start with you. Where did you learn game development and the tool set and coding, and where did that come from? And sort of
Um,
what are your favorite ways to go about that now?
so I kind of cut my teeth on a program called HyperCard. If anyone is old enough to remember like the pre OS 10 Mac era, there's this like coding for the every person, made
Yeah,
visual, made intuitive. It had a programming language that was not too far removed from just plain English language. So I made a bunch of of course, the first thing I did was start making games. I was into like the King's Quest series at the time.
Mhm.
So I made the
Mhm.
the My Quest, and it was just like a point and click. It was not something I shared with all my friends because it's like, oh look, I made a game, but I don't know if it's even playable these days. I don't know how you'd set up. I'm sure I have the file somewhere because I'm a digital pack rat, but, um,
right.
so that was it was a lot of just trial and error with tools I was lucky enough to grow up with. Um, I did get a computer science degree at university, at Valparaiso University.
Valpo.
Yeah,
I'm from the
Valpo.
Midwest, so
Okay.
I'm very familiar with Valpo and it was Indy and then Madison. Obviously, I grew up going up to
Mhm.
Wisconsin my whole life, so I'm Chicago
Did you?
suburbs
Oh,
uh, right now.
Ah,
But
okay.
yes, spent plenty of time up in Wisconsin, camping and that my whole life. So,
yeah.
Nice.
and you did get computer science degree, so you
Yes.
did
Yeah.
you
So I got
yeah, so where are you at sort of today in terms of the languages and tools that you're excited about
it's
using
still like
and using now?
I mean, for the day we fought space, that was all written in native iOS code, old enough that it was Objective C based and not Swift based, or
Sure.
like started long ago. And that helped for me too, because, C++ is kind of the closest thing I have to a native programming language, although I say that not having written a C++ program in probably a decade because
Mhm.
Yeah.
everything is a variation of it. I've written
But
JavaScript,
it's
I've
like
written C sharp, I've written Objective C,
it's your
but
mother tongue.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
my mother tongue. It's what all these other satellite languages revolve around in my brain. So Objective C was not, and once you get over the syntax, it's not that big of a leap. Um, and it is, as far as how you would get into learning programming, the language you pick is not, once you've learned two programming languages, the third and fourth and fifth and sixth come so easy compared to those first two. So I wouldn't worry too much. Like if in terms of advice for new people trying to get into games programming, some people make a big deal like, oh, you got to learn Python first, you got to learn C sharp. I'm like, no, just learn whatever. Learn turtle graphics,
Right.
learn Forth, learn
Right.
intercal, you know?
That's great advice. Learn whatever you have easy access to.
That is, and coming as from the perspective of a coder myself, I learned in C mostly to way back when I started C, then C++ and C sharp. That was where I did most of my professional coding life. But
Mhm.
from there, then yes, anything else that just came along, Java, PHP, Python, being able to just grab some code nowadays and read through anything. 80% of every coding language shares the same kind of patterns and structures. So
Mhm.
then interpreting the language after that or adding on how they go about things or remembering not to put a semicolon in this particular language at the end of a
Mhm.
at the end of a phrase or whatever
And the
is
development
a side.
the development tools these days will catch 90% of your just little stupid
Mhm.
mistakes
Syntax.
as you
Yeah.
type. If you forget the
Yeah.
semicolon, it'll like, "Hey,
Yeah.
need something here?"
The the IDEs are getting really good at that,
Yeah.
and the languages are getting uh, more effective in being able to get your thoughts across without having to worry as much today about the syntax as the nitty
Mm.
gritty of coding in C or C++ back in the day. Now, something I'm less familiar with, and I think you're a little bit more familiar with, Seema, than I am, is on the art side. So Susan, where did that start from? And maybe you and Seema can chat about art here for a second and those tools and where that came from.
Yeah. I have also been making art my whole life, starting with sitting with my dad watching PBS and watching Bob Ross
Mm-hmm.
paint. That was definitely my first art influences. And From there, in regards to gaming, a couple friends of mine and we had this grand idea when I was 19 that we were going to make a video game together. And although that never happened, I did go to college for art. So studio art and graphic design, and then later art education. So my coming into video games was a very roundabout way, with this very studio paper media background, then coming into digital art through my graphic design and illustration, and then from there making video games with
Oh,
that.
that's excellent. That idea of, hey, I'm in college, gonna get together with my friends and do a thing. Back in the 80s, it would be forming a band. Nowadays, I think it's, we're gonna make a
Yeah.
game. We're gonna make a game studio. I think people
Yeah.
still form
Uh-huh.
bands? I think they do, but
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I was just gonna say when I play a game and I really like it, my mind does not go to, oh, I'm gonna make a game. So I think that is a particular talent
Oh,
and like personality trait that you two have. And yeah, that's very
I
impressive
don't
to
know,
me.
Seema. I've got some ideas. I'm gonna have to rope
Okay.
you in and we'll come up with a new Overlords game of something at some point. So, Susan, that transition from physical art, just art, basic design and art skills, which is the core of art, no matter what medium you're doing it in, to
hmm
digital. Then, what digital tools are you using today?
So because this game was created as a 2D game, my programs that I use primarily have been Illustrator and Photoshop, and also Procreate, which is where in the last chunk of artwork that I have made for the game has been mostly created in. And if you haven't heard of Procreate, it's a fantastic program on the iPad, and it is really intuitive. The tools involved, and there's a lot of people out there that will create brushes for it that you can download.
And it's really accessible to anyone.
Yes, it is. It's very inexpensive. It's very easy to use, and it creates just very gorgeous artwork. Or at
I
least
just yeah,
I've seen out
you're
there, just
creating the gorgeous artwork.
beautiful.
Well,
Procreate. Yeah. But yeah, I was really impressed to learn that you work in Procreate. So do you do like beginning stages in Illustrator and then move to Procreate, it sounded like?
Yeah, that's how this started anyway. I started off with the concept art definitely in dry media, so pencil, or actually a lot of
mm,
pastels for the environment art, for the concept art, some watercolor as well, and then transferred that to Photoshop and did a lot of the vector art in Illustrator for the ships and character art. Took that and brought that into Procreate and updated it there
got
and
it.
created the look that we have now.
Well, I'm
Well,
glad to hear that.
I love the look that you have now. I'm in love with this. I'm waiting for, well, I mean, we can say available now. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
ordered
we're
it.
recording
Thank
this a
you.
few days early, but at the sound of anyone out there hearing this, it's available now on the App Store, The Day We Fought
Yeah.
Space. So, well, that's super exciting to be here right at the launch for you guys too. How is
Yeah.
that? How is that feeling for you? How is launching this? This has been a journey, right? So Cathy, when did you
Yeah.
start working on this?
It was 2012 that the first
Okay.
prototypes were put together, which is a long time to be making a game. Yeah, there's just a lot that went into it, and it feels unreal
Mhm.
that even just to see it now as we're recording, see it in the App Store with the pre-order button. It's like, oh my God, how is this happen? We're doing a countdown on our Discord right now, and every time we inch closer, it's like, oh my gosh, we are in the last
It's happening.
6 days. What is this?
Right.
It's
Right. That
exciting,
has to
but
be amazing.
it almost feels like, "What? This can't be real."
Right.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh,
maybe by the end of this, we'll get into what's next. But let's go a little bit more with the what's now, because I think one of the things that is pretty fun is the day we fought space is a cool shoot 'em up side scroller kind of game, but there's some twists to it. So I'm
Mhm.
interested to hear how you guys came together to put those twists together, both from a design perspective, from a game design perspective, and then from an art perspective, and get the aesthetic to match up with the mechanics and how did that come together?
So the original, like, starting from square one, the very first prototype came about with me having played some shoot 'em up games on the iPad and really liking how with a touch control compared to a joystick, you didn't have to fight the controls. Like, the controls weren't part of the challenge. Sometimes when you're
Mhm.
dodging 100 things on screen, I it's not that natural compared to, it's easy to
Right.
weave your finger in and out of dots on a screen, and it just makes you feel so much more it makes you feel like an amazing pilot that way, and that got me thinking, "Okay, well,
mhm.
if you can do this with 1 finger, what can you do if you've got 2 full hands at your disposal?" And what I came up with was this idea that you could not only aim your fire kinda like a twin stick shooter, but actually go between spread fire and focus fire with 2 fingers and get that with instant intuitive precision, let you adapt to the battlefield, let you focus your fire on one big ship, let you spread it out to cover the entire battlefield. And ideas kind of built from there. The physics came kind of so I should preface that the game has a physics engine. So it's not
Right.
just the traditional shoot something and it evaporates. It you shoot an enemy and gravity exists in this world.
Yeah.
So the debris crashes down. You get to line up these chain reaction moments where you see like a train at the top of the screen and you get to rain its cars down on everything below it. Um, that came as kind of an accident with one of the first builds. The collision detection code that I was using, I had it configured wrong, and instead of the original classic "poof, it's gone," it was the shots were knocking enemies into other enemies. And we came back to that
Yeah.
and, like, we posted some videos like, "Haha, look at this bug," and everyone was like, "That's a feature, friends." So we made it a
Yeah.
feature. We
Uh-huh.
made it the core feature,
Yes.
and that kind of visceral tactile nature did inform, like, what we wanted for the artwork. We wanted it to feel
Mhm.
like it was a comic book you were holding in your hands because it was such a hands-on game.
Okay. One of the really fun parts that you just started to describe was the aesthetic, the comic book aesthetic. So let's
Mhm.
let's let's start
Yes.
there. How did you guys come up with so
Yeah.
as you said, you wanted it to sort of feel like a comic book and look like a comic book. Had you done that kind of art style before, Susan, and played with that comic book aesthetic?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were first sitting down, definitely the idea was that we had the idea of having it have kind of like a very kind of tongue in cheek kind of aspect to it, and from there we developed the comic book 1970s almost science fiction novel kind of look to it. And comic books have been a huge part of my life, my entire life. I think they've been a huge part of Kathy's life as well. I got into comics when I was in 6th grade, and I picked up my first one, which was an Excalibur comic,
Excellent.
which is it's a Marvel comic. It's very obscure, and I just obsessively started drawing comic book characters and backgrounds and all of that from there. So this game really just fit into that perfectly, being able to take my love of comic books and create a game that was also our own
Right.
based on that
And it
style.
doesn't map to, or
Yeah.
it doesn't, it definitely has its own aesthetic, which is really, really cool. And that does set
Yeah.
it apart visually as you're sort of like looking out there for games to play. And then the second thing that sets it apart from the art perspective is the design of the weapons and the ships. And
Mhm.
I would
Mhm.
imagine as you two work together, trying
Mhm.
to
Yes.
match the design and the art to a mechanic or a weapon that's being created. How did that work back and forth between you two?
Yeah, that was
Mhm.
very collaborative. Kathy would often have ideas for different weaponry, like, for instance, saw blades or the wrecking ball, and she would be like, "Okay, can you come up with something that fits this aesthetic?" And so I would come back
Mhm.
with things, and we'd have to really consider the physics and the animation in terms of making it work for the game. A good example of that, I think, is the dragon. In the fact that uh, even though that's not a weapon, it is an enemy that you happen to fight, dragon. It has so many moving parts that physics definitely plays a role in, especially if you hit it with other things. It's other, like, let's say for instance the train is coming from above. You have to make sure that the artwork created for that is created in a way that it works
Sure,
with physics.
sure, that makes sense.
One of the things I kept having to ask for was, okay, I need what's behind this part because if you hinge it in a certain
Yeah.
way, then this we're seeing these raw edges. Um,
Mhm.
so getting some of those things you don't really
Yes.
think of if you're doing an actual literal comic book where you can't snap a figure in half.
Hmm.
Right,
And then the
right.
other thing is kind of the communicate. Ultimately, it's communication to the player. So, like with the bullets, how many
Hmm.
back and forth did we have about what the bullets should and that didn't even solidify until, like, 2 months before launch, what the bullets looked like.
Because we definitely wanted it to be the art style to be very
Mhm.
playable, and visually something that the players could recognize,
And that makes a ton of sense.
and be
And
aware of.
that iterative
Yeah.
process to ensure that you're creating an experience that communicates not only the aesthetic, but the physics and the gameplay to everyone is, I
Mhm.
think,
Hmm.
uh, a key part of trying to make sure that that works.
So as you were
Um,
doing these back and forth things, were they like in person or did you email back and forth or how did you accomplish that collaboration?
Well, because I live in Rhode Island and Kathy lives in Wisconsin, we did not have the opportunity to meet in person very often. But we have been meeting just
Mhm.
like this, like Zoom,
Yeah.
Yeah. In
sure.
the
FaceTime.
early days, we had a couple kinda like sketchbook meetings, but most of it's been online, just kinda sending Susan builds so she can see what everything looks like in the game, and then
Hmm.
sometimes she'll spot something that I didn't even see once it's in the game, and
That's excellent. We've heard from a bunch of studios that even the big studios, a lot more remote work is going on, and
Mhm.
that's
Hmm.
both a challenge and an opportunity. It allows people to spread out.
Yes.
It allows you to go after team members and bring in talent from lots of other places. But then there's the challenge of collaborating with a team that's very distributed. Now with uh, Tursiops Truncatus mostly focused on you two working together, and I know you have a couple other team members that you're pulling in for parts of it.
Mhm.
I would imagine it's not as bad. You guys are probably pretty well connected. I would say you probably
Hmm.
don't have a problem calling each other up and asking questions.
Right.
Whereas if you have a really big
Yeah.
team, that can be a problem. Even between you two, do you have set working hours and then set aside time that you make sure you connect, or like standing meetings, or do you just call up each other when dynamically whenever something comes up or when you have a need to talk?
We've got our every other week meeting that they started some of them we we'd talk for like the entire afternoon. We'd have like 4-hour meetings at
Yeah.
points. But and you know, we'd send just emails between that, but having that kind of personal touch
Sure.
base, you know, just to kind of work through sometimes just talking out a design issue is what you need. 20 minutes of talking
Mhm.
something out can sometimes beat
Right.
2 hours of staring at it on your own. Um, so so having that has helped.
Mhm.
Um, and once we got a producer on board and we got set up with Jira, getting some of the logistics between us,
Mm,
getting our priorities,
now you're getting serious.
getting all of that. Like even with a two-person team, that level of organization does it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
I can
it does.
imagine. And I come from enterprise consulting and, you know, work for Accenture, Accenture Avanade, work for Microsoft. So I'm very familiar with overly detailed planning, project plans,
Mm.
overly organized and engineered project teams, and all of the roles. SEMA may be able to talk about it, even in putting this podcast together. We've got it.
Well, I was gonna say that, we talked to one studio where the genre of their game they picked, based on market research, and it sounds like you're on the far other side of that continuum where the game itself is like a labor of love that started in 2012,
Yeah.
and you're like, "This is what I wanna make." And I I am curious if there was a moment where you were making it, but then there's another moment where it's actually going to happen and it's a business and you're gonna hire people, like you just mentioned a producer.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that there was a moment, like, because the intent was always to have a viable product at the end of this.
Mhm.
It did go longer than I anticipated. I didn't start out in 2012 saying, you know what I want to spend the next decade on is this one thing. Like, not that I don't love what we produced in that decade, but yeah, it did come from just, oh, this would be a great thing to explore. And it wasn't necessarily there are other ideas I had, like, but what I was looking for was, okay, what's something unique that might stand out? So just because it
Yeah,
is a project that you're passionate about doesn't mean from the list of projects you are excited to create, you can't look through that and think, okay, what's something that could be unique? What's something that definitely there's not enough of out there? Even, what we're gonna be doing,
Mhm.
going forward, kinda floating some more of these kinda building the community outreach and the promo into the dev cycle, like, what are people responding to, is gonna inform which of those ideas we love is also an idea the world is ready for, or the world is hungry for. So
that's, I think, really good advice
And that's
for
sort of like your own version of market research really, or
right.
data,
right,
yeah.
right.
I like that idea of taking my list of ideas of all of the things because it's not just one thing for most of us.
You can't
We
do
have
all your ideas anyway.
Right.
right. So how do we pick which
Mhm.
idea? And this is advice out there to people that might have, some sort of creative project that they want to go after, but make something out of it that they'll be unleashing upon the world. Of that portfolio of ideas that I might have, what is out there that people will respond to most? How can I sort
Mhm.
that list by what's most interesting to the market right now? What's differentiated? What's a little bit different where we could carve out a space, a niche, and put something out there? So that's really good advice to people in terms of picking the right thing. And well, that was the name of our last show, the right game at the right time. Uh,
Mhm.
exactly. So
Mhm.
back on the idea of you as a couple people getting together, you've got an idea, you start down that path, and now it's a business and it's releasing, and there's a game that's coming out there, and you pulled a couple other people in. I'm sure there were probably some pivot points along the way where you said, we need to get a little bit
Mhm.
bigger here. We need to now go off and add this, maybe even just another hat that you wear to say, okay, well, now
Yeah.
somebody needs to be in charge of getting in touch with the Apple or understanding that publishing process, become a publisher in addition to a developer. What would what does that look like? What are those key challenges, and what advice would you have to other people about where you really need to think hard about those pivot points or those challenges?
I think, I'm gonna quote another developer here. This was, Tanya from I think this was Tanya from Kit Fox saying this, that, like, you should if there's something like, if more than 20% of what you're doing is something you dread doing, you need to not be doing that. You as a person need to not be doing I'm trying to paraphrase a tweet
No,
from a
I
year
get
ago.
I
But,
but those sound like words to live by, really.
um,
I'm thinking about that for myself in all kinds of areas
yeah.
now that you say it.
So so there definitely like, I started this, I started as a solo dev, and, like, there is kind of a difference to the early hires compared to the later ones. Because when I brought Susan in, I was like, "Okay, I have a small amount of art skill, but what I really want is, like, someone with full on trained, has put in the hours, is a good artist on this project." So that was more of an expansive thing, or some of the more recent hires were people like the producer hat was one I always struggled with wearing. I'm not great at delegating, I'm not great at being organized, I'm not great at like for someone who owns a company, I'm not great at telling people what to do. So getting that hat passed off to someone was
Mhm.
eh, such a "why didn't I do this earlier" moment. And I know why I didn't. Like, I'm not gonna go into nitty-gritty details with all of that, but, getting, PR was another person we brought in, when we thought the game
Sure.
was just around the corner for release, which is not when you should be looking into PR. You should be looking into PR earlier into development, because what I've learned, what I had no idea about before I started working with a PR person, is that there is this feedback loop between you share a game to the world. It's not just like taking a bullhorn and saying, "Hey world, here's this game we're making." There is
Mhm.
a receptive part of marketing. Like, especially like going to conventions is kind of the best example of that, because not only are you sharing what you've made with the world, you get to see firsthand how the world is interacting with your game. So especially when you still have development time to kind of make adjustments, we even made some pretty big pivots based on some earlier convention appearances. So that was all, I- I'm good. I'm the kind of person, my skill set, it's good with mechanical things, it's good with logical things. I'm not always great with kind of understanding humans. So
Mhm.
finding people
So
that really complement, instead of trying to force my way through learning all of that, finding people that could complement the gaps in my skill set was
right,
just such
right.
a like, okay. So once we had that full set, and um QA was something that we have had, just because I knew from my previous software job, my non-game software jobs, like, the person who writes code is the worst person in the world to test that code. Like, that's
Yeah.
just a bad idea. So I had hired
Right.
QA pretty early on. It's been 4 people who have rotated in and out in those roles. Um, and once we had
You
that
never ask
set,
the
it was
developer
like
if the software is done. You
right,
have to ask the
exactly.
QA if the software is done. Well, this, I think, is really a mature stance for
Yeah.
any person
Mhm.
in any role to really internalize. And this is something we all can learn from, which is that kind of honest self-reflection about what am I good at? Where do my strengths lie? Doubling down on your strengths, and then getting team members and collaborators that can not just compensate for your weaknesses, but complement your strengths with their strengths and build a stronger team as a result. That does take a high level of maturity to have that kind of self-awareness and self-reflection. I have seen in all disciplines, people go out and think they can do it all. And sometimes they can. You'll have a brilliant person that can go off
Yeah.
and do everything. But that's very, very rare.
Yeah, I'm
But
always amazed by those people.
it is super rare, though. And the
Mhm.
best things always come
Yeah.
from teams of people. So I
Mhm.
think that's really interesting.
Mhm.
And
So
what you see pretty often are people who feel like, okay, I'm weak in this area, therefore I have to work really hard in
Mhm.
this area and improve. When I
mm,
think you're
And
so right, there's way more benefit to like taking the area where you're strong and spending your time there and get someone strong in your weak area.
yes,
and when you see
yes, that is life advice that I've learned from a lot of places.
a lot of talks also, like, you gotta be aware of the survivor bias because some of the game design, like, all the
Yes.
video you'll see online, it'll be like, "This is how I learned to become my own producer." It's like, more power to you if you found a way, but you can't feel like you failed if you bring in help. Like, that's
No,
not
not at
Right.
all.
a sign of weakness, that's a sign of strength.
Yeah. No, that's a strength.
That's
And
survivorship bias
yeah.
for anyone that's not familiar with the concept. It's only hearing from those people that basically won the lottery in either skills or
Mhm.
they struck lightning,
Yeah.
and trying to use that as a guide for how you should go about your life is the worst advice possible.
Mhm.
Here's how to win the lottery because I won the lottery. You buy a lottery ticket and then you win. No, that's not
It's
advice. It's
easy.
not going to do anything. So yes, that one person
Uh-huh.
who I'm a brilliant artist and a coder and a marketer, and I also happen to be in the right place at the right time and create this product that went out to the market and became really big. You can do it too. You can build Minecraft.
Right.
No, by yourself
Yeah,
in your
right.
basement. No, the putting the right team together and getting, as Seema, as you suggested, I think is brilliant as well. Getting the opportunity to double down on your strengths and spend time
Mhm.
on that
Mhm.
and making your strengths stronger rather than wasting time messing around with your weaknesses is brilliant. That's a really
Mhm.
good bit of advice for everybody. So with that in mind, so to sort of expand, let's start with Susan. Down the road, tr- Tursiops Truncatus now is huge, and you are now running an art studio. What are the next couple roles that you would want to sort of expand into or bring into? What is your studio team going to look like at that point?
Well, that's a big question. I would love personally to be able to do a lot of the art, kind of art direction, but also do a lot of the concept art, 2D animation, but also have a team to be able to, like we've been talking about, delegate some of the areas that I'm not as strong in to other artists, and be able to have them
So
take
you said
over some of
concept
those
art. Does
areas.
that mean that
Would be
you're
fantastic.
you would like to hand off like the animation part or
Yeah, I would like to be able to really. It's not so much that I would want to hand off that area, but if I had a choice, I'd really like to be able to develop the look of a game, and then some of the other areas like
oh yeah.
maybe UI or animation, because that's an area that I'm not as strong in. I would love to be able to be able to delegate that and kind of collaborate as well with
I
others
I
to make
I
sure
totally forget that the
that
UI
we work
is
together.
part of this whole
Mhm.
it's part of the look, it's part of the
Yeah,
sound, it's part of
yeah.
everything.
The
I
fact
keep
that you
getting
forgot
reminded of
about
that.
it means we
and a
did it
different
right.
discipline.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's great, Susan. I like the idea of you then what that also provides the opportunity to do is scale your skills. So if you're the designer and you're sort of
Mm-hmm.
designing these concepts and laying out these concepts, there's a lot of hard work to realize the concept, to render the concepts. And if you can have a team that then is rendering those
Mm-hmm.
concepts, and we'll talk in just a second, Cathy, on the development side, which this
Yeah.
happens as well. If you have a team that can render that concept, then it scales the value that you can provide in the design and being able to create the world and then have people help render that on the side. You then can do more and more and more and bigger projects that you wouldn't be able to do if you had to do all the small parts yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, Cathy, I expect, and
Mm-hmm.
I know just
Yeah.
from a development perspective, that goes the same way on that side. In my career as a coder, I started doing all of the thing. I was a low-level coder. I did Windows development. I did enterprise development. As my career progressed, and this isn't something that everyone wants to necessarily do, and I'm interested to
Mhm.
hear where you lie. I did get much more into design and architecture and engineering of solutions to the point where I was at this point in my career, and the other podcast I do is at the level of, hey, new technology coming down the road. What should enterprises start to envision from an innovation perspective? So very kind of at the
Mhm.
10,000-foot level in terms of putting innovation, digital innovation together. So where are you in your desire, in where you have the most fun, and where do you scale at that point from the
Uh,
text side?
so where I would ideally be, so I would love to have at least another programmer on board. For me, programming has always been a means to an end of creation. So it's like the act of
Mhm.
coding, it's fulfilling because of what it produces, not fulfilling because I love looking at 400 lines of logic and trying to find, oh, how can I optimize? That's not what drives me. It's
Right.
so like if I had unlimited team members, I'd envision myself doing less of the programming and more of the assembling. So more not assembling in the sense of assembly code. That's like the opposite direction. More of
Right.
the,
Right.
have
Right.
have some programmers that can make Legos for me. And then I take those
Yeah,
programming Legos and build a house out of them. Kind of do more of the level design, do more of the higher
that's interesting.
That
concepts,
makes
doing
perfect
more of
sense to me.
the
Yeah.
almost kind of almost the opposite direction that you were like I want to be where the rubber's hitting the road. I want someone else to build the car. I
Sure.
want to be that surface between the vehicle and the player's final experience more so than
Grabbing the tools,
the engineer.
grabbing the Lego blocks,
Mhm.
snapping them together in interesting ways, and seeing what that results in from a
Yeah.
output perspective. I think that's really interesting. And and we I wanna make it clear to anyone that's listening out there, I'm not downplaying the value of someone that does want to just be
Mhm.
writing the code and optimizing
Oh,
and finding
same
the
here.
best way to create the
Mm-hmm.
most
Right.
optimal feature because it's
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
incredibly valuable. And the people that have that skill are, first of all, very well compensated, even in the gaming industry right now. So
Mhm.
certainly don't shy away from that. And a vital part of the team. And I
Mhm.
think everyone needs to then, as we've been saying,
Mm-hmm.
sort of figure out what your skill set is, feel out where you want to be spending that time, and then make that the thing that you go after and try to offer up as your skill set to a team like this.
I
That's
think
really
one
interesting.
things we've learned about talking to various studios at this point, like in the AAA world, it's basically a team effort. But
Yeah.
even in this small indie world, it's
Mhm.
also a team effort. It's just always a team effort.
Mhm.
Right. Now we were
Yeah.
talking to Ubisoft
Yeah.
and it was 300. No, wait, how many people did he say?
I don't remember.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
Over
Uh,
time, yeah.
you do need to specialize then as well, and it sort of
Mhm.
naturally happens. The other thing that happens with a small studio, and I'm sure you both feel this quite a bit, is those roles still tend to exist no matter how small you are or if you're only one person. those roles exist, and then you're collaborating with yourself,
Right.
basically, because those things still need to happen. Those roles and
Yes.
disciplines and things
Essentially,
need to
yes.
happen.
We
Speaking
take
of
on
all
all
the
of the
roles,
roles.
I I'm curious about the process of on the art side too, because like I can envision building things in Illustrator and bringing things in with Photoshop and drawing things in Procreate, but how do you get from that state to like moving interactive games? I mean, there must be other tools in that stream.
Yeah. So that was definitely kind of where Kathy came in too, is so I created the artwork in a way that was able to be animated and
We
moving parts,
had
and then
there's a
Kathy
company
can
that
attest to how.
I wish I could link to, but I don't think they're operating anymore, called Arctic Mill. They're old iOS developers, and they blessed the world with some scripts that could export Illustrator layers into a format that was very easy to drop into, like, um, texture packing software. So
Sure.
there was kinda some other team had made some bespoke
Mhm.
tools to solve that issue, and we have been using them. Like, those tools, at least with our studio, have outlasted their their I don't maybe they
Existence.
rebranded. I hope they're still doing good things because they made such a time saver for us. So I wish them the best. But and we did have some other kind of
Mhm.
like scripty bits to get Photoshop files. We at one time, gosh, how do we even explain the color tool? That was a very bespoke
Oh, yeah.
solution.
Um,
Um,
yeah, that was so when we were
yeah,
redesigning some of the ships
yeah,
so that they were more visible for the players, we didn't want to have to completely create every single
mhm,
ship in all of the different multiple colors that they were in. And so what we ended up doing was creating them in grayscale and then going into Photoshop
yeah,
and using such things as these are all very technical terms, but channel mixer and some of the other tools that Photoshop has available to be able
mhm.
to just pop
Interesting.
in
And that way we
essentially
got
the
consistent
colors that we were
colors
using
across every
already
different
on these grayscale ships.
ship within a planet as well. Like, we
Yep.
had, like, some of the art up to that point, there were a couple
Yes.
different prototype versions in or not prototype, a couple different iterations of the color scheme in the game at once. So you'd get kind of, this is more of a slate blue and this is more of an ice blue. Um, we actually there's a dev blog post we have
Yeah.
that kinda
Depending on
outlines
the
the
planet and
process. So that would be,
yes.
um,
Excellent.
on our
Well,
website,
we'll pop that up here.
tursiopstudios.com. It gets into some of the technical, like, there's linear algebra, but don't be afraid. I draw cartoons
No, I am
to
afraid.
help the linear algebra not be scary.
Linear algebra is
It's not
super
scary.
important these days. That's interesting, and that if people start thinking about the breakdown and where you might wanna get into the process and some of the things you might wanna do, that idea of the concept and the concept art and sketching that out is one step, and then there's these other steps of, as you're suggesting, creating a high dynamic range grayscale asset that then can be both broken apart from a animation perspective and then broken apart from a texturing and layering and coloring perspective. All of those steps
Mhm.
of that art pipeline, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I also think it's important that this process you talked about in terms of finding the right tools. The
Mhm,
tools and potentially even developing
Yes.
some of those tools, and I know the bigger shops do
mhm,
this work. We had some advice from a couple people in terms of how can you get into game development, and one of the ways you can get into game development is to start as being one of those tool developers. So you may not be writing the core game code to start in a big AAA studio,
mhm,
but if you've got those coding skills and you can be writing some of those custom bespoke tools, these tools are super important to the process. There are engines that are being built that are supporting parts of the game. There are tools that are just taking and moving assets between the different
Mhm.
layers from the workflow pipeline. All of that tool development is just as important as the core gameplay loop code that is happening as well.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping, and this is one of the things I'm interested to see, especially as we get into advances in GPT-3 and machine learning and artificial intelligence and the kinds of tools that can be done there, procedural generation, the tools library for people to be able to create games, I think is going to advance in the next few years and create a lot more opportunity for people that are very creative and have these ideas to pick and choose and grab some of these tool sets and get more ideas rendered more quickly and easily in
Mhm.
very interesting ways.
And you're definitely what I was gonna say earlier when we were talking about solo devs is that, like, even when you bill yourself as a solo dev, a lot of times it's still a team effort because you're using so many of
Mm.
these tools that are out there. Like, even in my freeware days, and I'm guilty of describing myself as a solo dev, but I was using a tool called Allegro, like this old, I think still active community of like a bunch of game routines that someone else wrote the graphics routines so I could just use them. So it's and you're seeing a lot of that with like the asset stores and you know, um it's like tools like RPG Maker you can make a pretty good game with, you know.
That
I
idea
mean,
that we stand on the shoulders of giants,
Yeah.
I think is critical to understanding that, yes, even when you're alone, that's even more a reason to go out and find these assets and tools
Mhm.
and
A lot of that stuff has already been done, and just being able to use those resources is super helpful
one thing I've
for
been
game
wondering and
development.
just sort of building on that idea is like in the world of indie games, do you guys all know each other? Like, do you know other devs and do you know other artists, Susan?
Yeah, a little bit. And that's a lot of connections there have been made through the convention circuit for me personally. I'm not very good at putting myself out there, but I'm trying to be. But I think that there is a bit of an insular community within indie gaming and also a wider range community within game
Yeah,
development.
we've got
But
our kind of
that's
I think
studio.
I
great.
know a few a few people.
We've definitely got other
Kathy knows more.
studios we've made friends with at conventions. And we've got like in
Yeah,
Madison, the developer of Flipfly,
and
Aaron,
that's
um, he started up a indies meetup, which you know we haven't met in person for obvious reasons for the past few years, but um, there have been a lot of the smaller dev teams in Madison have we know each other, we like each other, play each other's games.
Yeah, Rhode Island also has a independent game developer association where they've started to meet up again, and I'm going to go on Thursday to my first one there to be able to meet some of
Yeah,
the
that's
So
Rhode
awesome. Because
Island
I
game
think of that
developers
community as a
as well.
place where you can float.
And
Like, has anyone tried this and what
Mhm,
problems did you run into? Or I can't make such and such happen. I'd like to. Yeah.
right.
yeah, there's a
mhm.
huge Discord community out there of game developers as well, and I just love it. I love how helpful everyone is. Like you said, Seema, about collaboration and offering feedback and advice, and
Mhm.
even up
Nice.
to portfolio critiques. Um, everyone is
That's
great,
awesome to hear.
and I'm thankful for that community.
This is,
Yeah,
I think, been an amazing talk. One of the things I did want to get to before we wrap up, though, is what's next. So you've
Yeah.
got this. This is coming out. This
You're
is,
done now, right?
We're
or
done. We're done. Yeah.
I'm sure you
Goodbye.
You're
want to
done
take a
with this
moment
game,
to
so
take a
what's the
breath,
next game?
to
Yeah.
to
Um,
to breathe. Do you have some ideas? And it doesn't have to be specific, but are there other goals, moonshot ideas? Where are you both headed next?
um, at least for my part, I've got some education to do, you know. This The Day We Fought Space was written in a native iOS environment, and that means we can't like have a switch port tomorrow. We'd have to kind of start the programming from square one.
Mhm.
We can't have an Android port. We can't have a tablet PC port. So I need to learn some of those. I need to get up to speed with a lot of these tools we've been talking about because a lot has changed since we started this game. Um, and I've got some prototyping to do. I've
Hmm.
got some, we talked about that a bit earlier, that I don't want to just dive in with the first idea that speaks to me, because that might not be an idea that's going to speak to me for long enough to finish a game. It might be a
Mm-hmm.
game that the
Mm-hmm.
world just isn't interested in, and I have other ideas I love that could go over better with the community, the world at large, could fill a better
Sure.
niche. So I've got a dozen at least ideas and fragments that I want to expand upon, but like there's not even a guarantee that one of those ideas is the seed that grows into the next. That could be something we an idea we have
Sure.
in 6 months that becomes our next game. So I kind of don't want to spend a whole lot of time going over every little idea I want to chase.
Right. Right.
Right. And there is,
That sounds
It's
like a
it's
really fun place to be,
yeah,
though. That
yeah,
opportunity to wallow in some of the ideas and explore and play with some new technologies and see what see what gels, see what manifests out of all of those ideas, and maybe
that's
mash up a few of the ideas.
it sounds stressful to me. See that difference between me and Max? It's like if there's too many ideas and you have to whittle them down, yeah, that's a hard process.
yeah, it is. It really is.
But
It
it's
is.
exciting.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. Just put them all, just get a giant whiteboard and just start putting them all up on the wall. And every day, draw more arrows and pointers and sketch
Draw more
things out. And
arrows.
Susan will sketch ideas and concept art, and it'll all come together. Before you know, the day after we fought space in Unreal 5 and virtual reality is going to be manifesting. We're all going to be walking around shooting guns in the air in the metaverse. I think that would be excellent.
What about art style? Like if you were going to work on another big project after this, would you do you see yourself exploring more of the sort of comic book aesthetic, or do you have like also like a list of places that you might like to go and you're thinking about in terms of art style?
Yeah, I would love to try different things. Definitely. I have when Cathy was mentioning how she's going to do a lot of education after this, I'm hoping to do some animation and some 3D. I have a working knowledge of some of that stuff, but I really want to delve into it a little bit more and learn how to do that. I think it would be really
Hmm.
beneficial for even if we do more 2D games. So many
I
2D
did not
games
know
are
that.
created in 3D programs, so I think that would be great. I have so many ideas in the back of my head as to different art styles that would be great for video games. Not only art styles that are already out there, but things like um, kind of
Hmm.
going back into my traditional art um, background, like
Oh yeah.
printmaking
I think
and
some of
things
the
like that. I think would be
best
phenomenal.
aesthetics of games come from taking traditional art and turning it
Hmm.
into the game world. One of my favorite old games. I forgot what it was, but
Yeah,
it was sculpted clay turned into a video game. That was just
yeah,
amazing, and I love that kind of concept.
Yeah. Is it Clay Fighter
I,
or is it
yeah. I
something
think I
else?
know what you're talking about, but I
It
also
was
don't
on the
remember the name of it.
Xbox, I bel no, I it Microsoft published it back in the '90s. That's how far we would have to go
Hmm.
back, and we would have to sort of dig it up. So if someone out there
Okay,
remembers what it is, put
okay.
it down in the comments. We'll chat about it. I'll dig it up and see if that was it. But really, really cool kind of ways to bring in those different arts. Well, hey, this has been amazing, and
Yeah.
we're I'm sure going to be really excited to see where you guys go. We're very want to say a big congratulations on the launch
Thank
of
you.
the day we
Thank
fought
you.
space. Everybody can go into the App
Thank
Store
you.
right now, iOS only at this point, but who knows what'll happen in the future. Go out there and get it. We're certainly going to get it. I know we've already got it pre-ordered, and by the time
Yeah.
anyone out there hears this, it will be available, and we can all goof off and play with that for a
All
while,
space.
I think that is going to be very, very cool. Yes. The day we fought in space together. There we go. The multiplayer universe that will evolve from here next.
All right,
So-
now you're stressing me out.
Don't count it out.
So if people want to keep in touch with you, they can obviously go to the App Store and get the game.
Mhm.
Where else should they go? Where can people stay in touch with Tursiops Truncatus and both of you in particular?
TursiopsStudios.com is our website. There's a newsletter sign up there. At Tursiops Studios on Twitter. We're pretty active there. There's a Discord that you can find your way to from either of those sites. We'd love to hear from players, hear what you think about The Day We Fought Space, hear what your favorite ships to play with, your favorite weapons.
Yeah, join our Discord for sure.
That's a
it's
great opportunity. And then people can reach out and chat with you directly and ask some of those questions and provide their feedback.
Mhm.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to get really close to people. We just started our own Discord for new overlords and are starting to chat with people that way. So that's excellent. We will jump in there as well and we'll stay connected. Again, this has been an amazing conversation. We wanted to thank you both for coming on and sharing this with us. And
Yeah, it's
we
been
will
awesome.
talk to you soon.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.